the time has come. It's not the end of a Baktun, but the beginning of a good session. So good afternoon. Welcome to the National Museum of the American Indian. Welcome also to our virtual audience out there in the world. We have quite a good following today, which watching this webcast. I'm Jose Barreiro. I'm director of the Latin America office here at the museum. And in this capacity, I'm honored to open today's important program, which is presented as part of the Bak'tun 13, the Guatemalan Celebration of Time, a 3-day festival celebrating Guatemalan history and culture, as well as the legacy of the Maya people. This afternoon's distinguished speaker, Dr. Victor Montejo, will be giving a fascinating illustrated talk titled Maya from the Inside, the 13 Baktun as Challenge to the Western Mind. December 21, 2012, in a few days, signals the much anticipated passing of the 13 Baktun in the ancient American indigenous system of timekeeping. As we approach the Maya calendar day that marks the turn of eras, Dr. Montejo offers a fascinating presentation on the deep meaning of Mayan culture and history from the perspective of a noted native scholar and author. Victor Montejo is a Jakaltek Maya, originally from Guatemala and living there again now. Previously a professor and chair of the Native American Studies Department at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Montejo, like I said, lives now in Guatemala. He was a former minister of peace in the Guatemalan Republic. Montejo also served as a member of the Guatemalan National Congress from 2004 to 2008. An internationally recognized author, Montejo's major publications include Testimony, Death of a Guatemalan Village, Voices from Exile, Violence and Survival in Modern Maya History, Maya Intellectual Renaissance, Critical Essays on Identity, Representation, and Leadership, Popol Vuh, Sacred Book of the Mayas, and Canil, Man of Lightning. His current projects focus on indigenous migration and transnationalism, as well as in developing a curriculum in Maya knowledge and epistemology in his new manuscript, Mayalogue, an interactionist theory of indigenous cultures. Well, before we begin, as I reminded part of the group earlier, please turn off your cell phones so that we can enjoy the presentation. We will have an audience question and answer session after Dr. Montejo's presentation. So please hold your questions until then. A microphone has been set up in the back of the center of the room. Please go to the microphone to ask your questions so that our speaker and webcast audience can hear the question. I welcome in particular Ambassador Vilman to the OAS from Guatemala. Thank you for your presence, sir. And please give a warm welcome to Dr. Montejo.
Mamin miai, yabi tato hakin teye hunes kehbalti. Sala la luena shkemai kute sholan, oshimi hakashuhuli haktu chuko pasho pasto paitach ayo. I would like to thank those who organized this event. I really appreciate the time to be here at the National Museum of the American Indian, a great place for Native Americans in the continent. My talk today is going to focus on the current issue, the 13 Baktun. I call it Maya from the Inside, 13 Baktun as a challenge to the Western mind. We are practically 6 days away from the closing of the 13 Baktun, which is the ending of 5,120 days, 125 years of Maya history, and to the beginning of a new era or cycle of 13 Baktun since the initial date 4 Ahau, 8 Kumbu, which is equivalent to the year 3114 BC. You can see this from the stela here, as you can, 13 Baktun. The Western world made too much noise when we reached the year 2000 from the Gregorian calendar. Since nothing really catastrophic happened at that ending of the year 2000, once again, some of these Western thinkers, astrologers, and New Agers are now assuring us that the Mayas predicted the end of the world on December 21st, 2012. Some of these pseudo-prophets have given us the exact time and hour of the end of the world, December 21st, 2012 at 11:15 a.m. So get your lunch a little earlier at that day. The claim that the Maya prophesied this apocalypse or that the Maya calendar will come to an end is absurd. Since ancient times, the Mayas have dealt with the major cycles within the calendar and have readjusted it, as shown by the ancient Maya priests, astronomers, and mathematicians who gathered in Copang in 1776, as shown, as we can see from the petrified image on altar C at Copang. This is the first gathering of astronomers to readjust the calendar at that time. The gathering of these Maya astronomers in ancient times make us think that Maya scientific knowledge and astronomy was so important and that the sacred Maya calendar was the instrument that guided human action for maintaining a reciprocal relationship between humans, nature, and the cosmos. Contrary to what has been said, the Mayas have not said in any of their documents that the date December 21st, 2012 is the day of the apocalypse or the end of the world. Again, pseudoscientists and mostly New Age fanatics have argued for the doomsday of humanity and have given dates for this cataclysmic event or el fin del mundo. Of course, there are still many doubts about the 13 Baktun and on what will happen on December 21st, 2012. The misinformation has worried too many people, and some are not sleeping, thinking on how the world will be dismantled by a major cataclysm a week from now. The creation of these myths of cataclysmic destruction has bothered some Maya scholars and activists who are struggling to rectify their distorted histories while providing a proper image and representation of their peoples and cultures. The positive achievements of the modern Mayans through their Pan-Maya movement are overshadowed by mass media sensationalist information flooding the world with the 13 Baktun. We can see that, the information is all over. The Chinese here are preparing an ark to save at least one family. Once again, the scientific knowledge of the Maya, which in this case the 13 Baktun and the sacred calendar, have been appropriated and distorted by non-Mayans, transforming this historical cosmic event from the long count into a marketable product to be consumed by tourists. The talk shows and the series from Discovery and History channels have already ignited the desire for a cosmic destruction. Of course, Hollywood has done its share with the film 2012 and now correspond to the media to increase the fear in the people, creating a neurotic population that is anxious to die, waiting for the end of the world. So I would like to talk about the power to explain the others, because this is the problem. The major problem to be solved at this closing of the Maya millennium is the issue of colonialism and the racist treatment of indigenous people in the Americas. Colonialism for indigenous people has been a destructive force that rejected and changed their traditional ways of life, calling them uncivilized, primitives, and savages. It is evident that this colonialist thinking has resurfaced with more force within the current debate surrounding the 13 Baktun. Others have taken the task to represent and explain things in the name of indigenous people, and the stories being told are not necessarily the way indigenous people understand things. Instead, these are the points of view of outsiders who tend to distort indigenous histories while misrepresenting their scientific achievements. The silencing of the voice of indigenous people has persisted, and the colonialist domination of the mind continues as these denigrating stories are becoming popularized as Maya predictions or prophecies. Searching for information on the 13 Baktun from Google, I came across many absurd explanations. Here is one that brings the whole history of misrepresentation of indigenous people as it was argued by early missionaries, anthropologists, and now by modern preachers who continue to repeat the same accusation against indigenous people. I have the text there for us to read. This is a quote, the Mayas. Can Mayan prophecies be trusted, and should Christians be paying any attention to them? The Mayans were polytheistic. They believe in many gods, pagans who practice ritualistic human sacrifice. Their religion involved the worship of nature gods, like gods of the sun, rain, and corn, and involved the use of astrology and divination. 2012, pegging on 2012 as the end of the world, it is not something that is derived from any Christian prophecies, but from pagan Mayan sources. If Jesus and the angels don't know the day, how would Satan know? And likewise, how would anyone, godly or not, know what Jesus himself said only the Father knew? In any event, we don't base our doctrine on the Mayans or Nostradamus, but on the Word of God. If you can follow what the early missionaries have said about the indigenous people, it's exactly the same. And here we are entering the 21st century or the 6th century Maya. So I want to focus then on these denial theories. After more than 500 years of colonial domination, the images and misrepresentation created for the Mayas have resurfaced in the context of the 13 Baktun, as I mentioned earlier. Early missionaries and scholars have always denied the Mayas' capacity for building their own cultures and civilization. First, they argued that the Mayas and their indigenous people were primitives and that they could not have developed this sophisticated civilization because they lacked the intellectual capacity. But since we also find extraordinary cultural and scientific achievements in this continent, such as monumental architecture, mathematics, astronomy, and the most perfect calendar, or the domestication of corn, etc., then the credits are given to other intelligent beings, but not to the ancient ones who inhabited these lands. Some modern scholars even explain that Maya culture and its extraordinary achievements were handed down to them by extraterrestrial beings. Others believe that the ancient survivors of Atlantis created Maya civilization, or perhaps it was developed by one of the lost tribes of Israel. I quote Professor Robert Carmack and Gary Gossen here. The Romantic tradition lives on today, most strikingly in the preposterous writing of Eric von Daniken. Von Daniken has achieved a large following by proposing that ancient astronauts from faraway galaxies visited the ancient Mesoamericans and introduced them to many technological and ideological innovations. The principal piece of evidence for von Daniken's theory is an image portrait on the lid of a tomb at the Maya site of Palenque, Mexico, end of quote. So here we have the lid of the tomb at Palenque, but this doesn't look good, so Eric von Daniken turned it in this way so you can see this astronaut in the capsule. But the only question is that to go to space, it seems that you have special equipment, but that is not the case with this image that we see here explained by them. The belief in extraterrestrial beings living among us is real. If we look into the programs, TV programs or stories about human abductions or contacts of the first, second, or third kind, or I don't know how many kinds, we see that these stories are among us. An anecdote, when I was a professor of Native American Studies at the University of Montana in Missoula, I think I was the only Maya in that place. So a lady came to me and asked, "Are you a Maya?" And I said, "Yes." "Oh, great. Do you know who you are?" She said, "Yes, I know. Where am I? Do you know where do you come from?" And I said, "Yes, I come from Guatemala." No, your real home." I said, "Yeah, it's Jakaltenango, Guatemala, my real home." "No, poor being," he said, "you don't know who you are. You are one of those beings from the galaxy," she told. So that's really scared me, because at that time I almost tried to say what it is, trying to go home. It is then clear that one of the most enduring problems for indigenous people such as the Mayas have been the issue of racism and discrimination that they have suffered throughout the centuries. The lack of opportunities and access to higher education has been one of the major problems that have conditioned indigenous people at a powerless position, to the point of being silenced so that others have claimed the right to speak for them. This is the case with the 13 Baktun, which has been seen as a folkloric event to be celebrated and not as one of the greatest mathematical achievements of the ancient Mayas or the closing of a great cycle of the long count within the sacred Maya calendar. Unfortunately, the world is focusing its attention on the ancient Mayas, while the modern ones are still struggling to free themselves from more than 500 years of oppression by the nation-states that have enclosed them in a timeless past as minorities that are destined to disappear. For modern Mayans, the present issue concerning the 13 Baktun is to rethink about our denigrated human condition as a result of colonialism. The current situation of poverty, landlessness, marginalization, and racist treatment against the Maya rural population must stop at this historical moment. This is the time for reflection and for building better social relationships with other people, as well as a respectful relationship with nature and the supernatural world. As we think about the 13 Baktun, we can ask ourselves the following question. What has happened in the past so that ancient civilizations, such as that of the Mayas and the Toltecs, documented several eras or cycles of life, destruction, and creation? How to explain the legend of the fifth son for Oin, or the son of movement among the Aztecs? Or the rightful human beings made of corn who are inhabiting Earth now, according to the Popol Vuh? The 13 Baktun is the most important cycle for the Mayas, and as I wrote in my book, Maya Intellectual Renaissance, the 13 Baktun theory refers to a cosmic consciousness, a period of major changes and painful transformation to a process of renewal or rebirth of human through difficult times. So we can ask, and this should be an important research project for everyone interested in knowing a more accurate history of the Mayas. What has happened in the year 3114? More specifically, why is this date so important for the ancient culture so they fix it in stone as a starting point of a new era or cycle of existence on Earth? What has happened in global world history at the period of time? We are told by most textbooks that history began around 3000 BC in Mesopotamia, and we follow the genealogy of Western science stemming from the Old World, but we forgot that cultures in the Americas may have a very ancient history too. The millennial discourse and the metaphor of the return. The concept of millennia, or the counting of time by having a point of reference, such as the birth of Christ, was a new Christian way of controlling history, so that we do not know much about the ancient histories of other cultures or civilizations. This tradition of counting time or dividing history in two ways, before and after Christ, is a medieval practice that still continues today. Of course, we don't say before or after Quetzalcoatl, but native Mesoamerican cultures did use a different system. Here we see also the writing of the 13 Baktun at the Tortuguero stela. The fixing of a starting point was based on a major cyclical event or catastrophe considered as a point of survival of the human race, which I call the renewal of the world, by the survivors of those calamities. That is why the 13 Baktun is very important as a commemorative date for the human race to be aware of the powers of nature and the dangers of destruction committed by humans on their natural habitat. The Popol Vuh tells us exactly how the human maids of wood who abuse their animals and their habitat were destroyed by a flood. The 13 Baktun won't present a smooth transition to a new era or beginning of a new Baktun, as most pseudo-scholars think. For example, Jose Argüelles noted, with the 13 Baktun, we will start a transition to a more harmonious life. You can read this all over. This is a wishful thinking, since we are entering into the most difficult days of humanity, so this is the time for preparation and the change of heart, as we must retake the ancient teachings of the ancestors, which indigenous peoples still maintain with great difficulties. The sophisticated calendars of ancient civilizations such as China and India, or the ancient calendar of Judea, which was dated to the supposed point of creation on 3761 BC, you see it's almost similar to the 3114 of the Maya, were put aside, and the Gregorian calendar was imposed for counting time and recording histories. And those histories that counted were mostly those of ancient cultures of Europe and the Middle East. But now we can say that ancient Mesoamerican cultures counted and measured time by using a calendar that had a starting point from a mythical event in 3114 BC. We can call it mythical since we are not sure if the event that marked the end, not spontaneous, but this was a progressive process, could have been the flood that all cultures mention in the oral traditions and myths. But if history, according to Eurocentric explanation, is the documenting by dates, we see here the 3114 has a historical date marking an event that may have happened 5,105 years ago. I mention this because when we say we are changing to a new era, it's not that simple. As we say, wow, December 22, we start a new era. Okay, it is one way to understand it, but the Toltecs and the Maya they say that the first era, the men made of wood, were destroyed by a major hurricane. That the men made of mud, men of wood, all of this, or the fifth son of the Toltecs, always tell you what was the destruction of that era. So it is something that I argue that we must understand in the changes of era. At least in these debates on the meaning of the Baktun, we are not hearing much about messianism or the coming of the Antichrist, the apocalypse. Evidently, the Mayas are not waiting for the return of a savior or a prophet that will save the world. The Mayas are not saying that a Messiah will come, except New Age philosophers who believe that ancient Maya astronauts will arrive or that extraterrestrial beings will come to help us to save our world. In other words, we are dealing with a millennial discourse and not with a messianic movement. So what we see on TV, History Channel, and other programs about the end of the Maya millennia, 13 Baktun, is the explanation given by outsiders who now call the ancient Mayas as their ancestors too. Others, and despite the technology of the 21st century and satellite spying on the sky, are telling us weird stories such as Planet X, Nibiru, if you read the internet, that supposedly will collide with Earth on December 21st, 2012. If these myth makers are advancing their theories and explanation at this time of global understanding of the world and have their followers, Imagine how the Spaniards may have felt when they first came to this continent. It was easy for them to create monsters, so they invented the myths that Moctezuma considered Cortés as God or the return of Quetzalcoatl. Historians such as David Carrasco and Ingela Clendigen have argued that the myth of the return of Quetzalcoatl and the elevation of Cortés as God is a post-conquest myth created by the Spaniards. Later, this myth was internalized by the Indians as their own colonization of the mind. The point is that the Quetzalcoatl myth was this is a quote from Carrasco. The point is that the Quetzalcoatl myth was a late-breaking story and therefore an invention of the second generation of Spaniards who did not draw from either eyewitness accounts or indigenous traditions, end of quote. Native ethnohistorical documents and even Bernal Diaz del Castillo, the royal chronicler, stated this the Aztec maintained a post in controlling the arrival of the strangers across the ashore at the peninsula of Yucatan. As an empire, they gathered information about the arrival of Columbus in the Caribbean island, or the information gathered from the two Spanish survivors rescued by the Mayas from the shipwreckage in 1511. This was the year also, in 1510, that Moctezuma sent ambassadors to their Quiché Maya allies in Guatemala and the Cachiquel Mayas, announcing that they be prepared to send warriors to defend their lands against the invaders. This appears in the Anales de los Cachiqueles. So the conquest of Tenochtitlan was 1519. This was very early in time that they already had this information. Of course, Moctezuma used many sources and methods for obtaining the most accurate information about the intruders. David Carrasco said that, I quote, Moctezuma made decisions on the basis of communication between humans and nature, humans and supernatural beings, and finally, humans and humans. Moctezuma used a very different epistemological approach, end of quote. Indigenous people know that they are living within a millennial time cycle of creation and destruction, even if they cannot interpret the Maya calendar. I mention this because among the Maya in the region where I live, any peasant can pick up a piece of pottery in their cornfield and look at it and think, what happened to these ancient ones? What happened to these lands? What destroyed these people that they call Paiwinaj, or the ancient ones? The concept of return in Maya cycle is not then the coming of the Messiah, but the return of ancient leaders that were still always there in their sacred sanctuaries, such as that of El Canil, the man of lightning. The Mayans and all indigenous people say that the mountains are living places, that the ancestors are still living there, so they never left, but they are there spiritually. The return is the resurrection of leadership, knowledge, and the return to the ancient teachings that indigenous people cherish and practice for millennia. This is the weaving of cycles and the infixing of new data into old ones, and vice versa, so that modern events become ancient and ancient events become modern. This is a concept not yet well defined, which in Mayalogue, the book that I am writing, I refer to as the process of telescoping of time. The return to the ancient values and the revival of the cosmic consciousness based in the philosophy that we all belong to a unity strongly interrelated, humans, nature, the cosmos, is an essential view for our survival. So the concept of return can also be applied to the process of reconstitution of the dismembered body of ancient leaders such as Tupac Amaru in South America. For those who know history, you know that Tupac Amaru, when he rebelled, he was captured, he was dismembered, his members were placed at the four corners of La Plaza, and in the middle, they placed his head on a post. This was the dismembered destruction of the culture, as I say. But as we know now, Even in South America, they're talking about the return of Tupac Amaru, or the body that is being reconstituted again or coming to life. For example, in the story of El Canil, we are shown that the process of mythification of heroes and ancient leaders is to fix in the collective memory of future generations the integrity of those leaders, and that they will return to show us the right way and ignite once again the cultures fading away because of oppression and destruction of material and spiritual basis of indigenous cultures. Of course, the integrity and resurrection of these heroes mentioned in this text, or the reconstitution of the dismembered body which is coming to life, is the personification of ancient leaders in modern ones, or the new Anils, the new Tupac Amaru, the new Cuauhtemocs, etc., who are now helping to rewrite Maya history and the revival of knowledge. The Mayas created their messages using metaphors and covered it with an aura of mystery so that they are fixed continuously in the collective memory of the civilizations. The 13 Baktun is not then a messianic movement in which the Mayas are waiting for the Savior to come, but the actual ending of a major calendrical cycle in the long count, which is the 13 Baktun. The calendar is an instrument that helps the Maya to maintain the memory of catastrophic events in ancient times, so the ending of the 13 Baktun is in itself the entering into a more chaotic world, an era that will symbolically set up its foot into the lands on December 21st, 2012. Humans on Earth are like travelers in a boat or airplane, and as we move with our world and our solar system and galaxy into the cosmos, we may reach a dark spot and feel the turbulence of a cosmic storm that may last many, many years, as mentioned in the Popol Vuh. While I was writing my notes about the 13 Baktun, and perhaps I was very interested about it, this is another anecdote. I had a dream that an old man from the town came to me and said, the 13 Baktun, or the end of the great cycle, is coming with colossal changes. Look in the sky, he said, look at the constellation of Aries. Over there, the changes have already started. Well, I don't have a telescope to start looking, but it was just a dream. You can see how we get connected to our ancestor when we become interested in something to know. World building, world maintenance, and world dismantling, the cosmic cycle. If we take the ancient date, 3114 BC, as an initial date for the present cycle, we can argue that the Mayas, or humanity for that matter, has lived for many millennia in the Mesoamerican territory. Just as great empires were built, flourished, and declined, in the same way, human existence has had its point of almost disappearance as a result of natural catastrophe, and also by the action of men. Again, I repeat, the men made of wood of the Popol Vuh. Knowing the cyclical patterns of life and history, whatever has happened in the past is likely to happen again in the future. As we are now dealing with the 13 Baktun, some Maya spiritual leaders believe that we are entering into a dangerous era or process of world dismantling. In the event of such a catastrophe, some nations have specific projects of building underground shelters, bunkers, and seed banks for securing their people's life and food for the future. This makes us think about the previous era or world dismantling shown in the Dresden Codex, or described in the Popol Vuh in the context of the previous. I think this was the context of the previous 13 Baktun. Some of the hidden messages in the Popol Vuh can be read as major eras or cycles of world building, world destruction, and world renewal. For example, the major event described in the Popol Vuh was the storm and flood that destroyed the men made of wood, and also repeated in the historical section of the Popol Vuh. I quote here the Popol Vuh. Instantly, a great shower began to fall when the fire of the tribes was burning. Much hail fell on all the tribes, and the fire was put out because of it. And again, the fire was extinguished. But the tribes did not perish when they came. Although they were dying of cold, there was much hail, black rain, and mist, and indescribable cold. End of quote. From this passage, we learn that indeed there was a cataclysmic storm that put off the fire and kept them in darkness and cold for many years. Another ceremony developed out of this great suffering was the ceremony of the new fire practiced by the Aztec and Mayas in pre-Hispanic times. The Popol Vuh says that they fast while waiting for the coming of the dawn and watched for the rising of the sun. They took turns, I quote the Popol Vuh, they took turns at watching the great star called Ikoki, which rises first before the sun. This quote, end of quote. This quote tells us that they already lived on earth and knew or observed the movement of the stars, the moon, and the sun. They were waiting for the cosmic storm, the Jakaltek Maya called Exile, to dissipate, allowing them to see the sun to rise and shine once again from the east as it used to be. Why, we should ask, all kinds of people would massively gather on top of a mountain, shivering by cold and without food and clothing except a handful of corn waiting for the sun to appear? This is what the historical part of the Popol Vuh tells us, how all of the tribes gather on top of the mountains, and they give the name of some of the volcanoes where all of them were waiting for the sun to come. So, of course, the highest mountain or the volcanoes are the best places to go and search for a place to save ourselves. Another important point to mention here is the issue of corn and other seeds mentioned in the Popol Vuh. Since each era has to have a new beginning, here we have the humans made of corn who were wise, respectful, and thankful to their creators. I think I have a corn. The legend of how corn was found and how it was redistributed to other nations is important in our reconstruction of the major flood and the renewal of the Maya world. The grains of corn and other seeds were hidden, so only a few animals knew where to find them. The Popol Vuh says, I quote, from Kayala, as they were called, came the yellow ears of corn and the white ears of corn. There was an abundance of delicious food in those villages called Pashil and Kayala. There were foods of every kind, small and large foods, small plants and large plants. The animals showed them the road, end of quote. The fact that there were seeds and all sorts of edible plants makes us think that these seeds were hidden in a place and the surviving generation needed to find them after the catastrophe or flood. In other words, here we are learning that the ancient ones, here the Mayans, protected their food in seed banks hidden in a stone crypt called Kungachen, high in the Cuchumatanes Highlands. The Jakaltek legend of the origin of corn mentioned that in Kungachen, near the Canil mountain in southern place of Jacaltenango, corn was found by Chekem, a big ant, but this insect did not want to tell the secret where the corn was hidden inside the hill. So Hichmam, the first father, tied a fiber thread on his waist and pulled it to the point of almost splitting the insect in half. Feeling the pain, the Sompopo told where to find the corn, and it was with the help of the lightning bolt that the stone crypt was split open and the seeds of many kinds were retrieved. From this point, all of the tribes gathered, and Hichmam redistributed corn to them so they could once again plant it and feed their families, saving in this way the world from hunger after the deluge. The The Jakaltek have a very beautiful story about this cataclysm and how corn was recovered. Whenever there are threats or imminent danger, the most sophisticated cultures have always tried to save food and prepare for the worst scenario in a case of major catastrophe. The stories of survival told in the Popol Vuh are now being reenacted in preparation of the 13 Baktun and possible threats for human existence worldwide. The most clear and decided project to save food for humanity after the apocalypse is Norway's project called the Doomsday Vault, being built at an island of Svalbard. It will, here I quote, "It will open just in time to safeguard our biodiversity against the apocalypse. Carved into the permafrost of a remote Arctic mountain about 620 miles from the North Pole, the vault has been built to withstand nuclear missiles or a plane crash on top of it, but it is also far enough above the sea level that it won't be flooded by melting ice caps. The vault will hold up to 4.5 million batches of seeds for the world's main food crops, allowing humanity to reestablish agriculture if our main food plants disappear due to a catastrophe." So this is true then that many nations are already preparing themselves for what they call the change of era. Just as now, these nations are preparing themselves for a possible cataclysm, in the future, the ancient ones did prepare themselves and save their seeds inside the mountains, as I already mentioned in the Popol Vuh. When I talk about saving seeds in the mountains, I was a school teacher in Western Guatemala in a rural area. I took my sixth grade students to explore caves in the region. So we went inside a cave with a rope, and then we found a chamber walking inside, and there were several big pots there full of what I think that were seeds. That all was dust, and we touched them, and it was dust, but not heavy there, but there were many of them. So now that I'm writing this, now I can assure, yes, that the Maya did save their seeds inside the mountains. I come to a conclusion here. The renewal of the world is in our hands, and it has to be done with a change of heart and mind, doing things differently than what we have been doing until now. The myth of the hero twins as they defeated death and darkness, or the lords of the underworld, and raised to heaven, becoming the sun and the moon, is the prototype of this struggle in preparation for the new era or the new sun. The cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal occurred throughout the millennia in Maya history, so once again we are coming to one of those cosmic changes when the Maya calendar will close and the prophetic cycle 13 Baktun and start a new era. I have mentioned that the concept of return is a key part of the millennial prophecy. The Mayas and other indigenous people are not referring to the actual return of a person, but the return of knowledge, the return of respect and recognition of the integrity of indigenous people. It refers to the return of consciousness about our relationship with other human beings, nature, and the cosmos. The return to respect and thankfulness for all forms of life with which we share the planet Earth. But this return and renewal cannot be made outside of our present world and be given to us as a gift from a savior or even from extraterrestrial beings. This is a return to human dignity and the recognition that we are not the center of the universe, homocentrism, but that the cosmos is the center of life and that we all are part of it. This is a cosmocentric paradigm in which our collective existence and survival will depend on our unity with all that exists on Earth and our connection to the cosmos, and this is what the ancient Mayas wanted us to remind ourselves when they worked the long count cycles of the 13 Baktun in the sacred Maya calendar. I will provide a list of things that I believe could be a challenge here to the scientific or community of researchers. Some people, of course, as I mentioned, are very worried, and some have come up with guides. So this is a kind of business. So I'm not doing a propaganda or trying to sell this guide, Guía de Sobrevivencia, How to Survive the 2012. But as you can see, people are very worried about what is going to happen to our planet Earth. People have been calling for the end of the world since antiquity, and the Western world have given much credit to prophecies such as that of Nostradamus. Church leaders have preached the end of the days and the second coming of Christ, but each date proposed has failed. You know, there are many prophets who have given dates, but it's not good to give dates. If you want to be a prophet, don't provide a date. Just say something will happen in the future. Right? Finally, I know this is, I still have several things that I want to mention here, but there is one thing that makes me very sad when I think about that the ancient Mayas, not that very, very ancient, but those indigenous people or Mayan, as we call them now, who saw their books being burned by Bishop Diego de Landa. They say in the books of Chilam Balam, and Diego de Landa also described it in his Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán, when the Mayans said, "We cried at midday, at noon, when we saw our books being destroyed, so we became orphans of knowledge." Orphans of knowledge. This was the disconnection, cutting the connection between the ancient Maya history and the present Maya. So we were left without the hieroglyphic writing system. To me, one important project to be developed within the changes to occur in the present 13 Baktun that will start is that we, indigenous people, start major projects, not only ourselves, but multidisciplinary teams, indigenous and non-indigenous, and start to focus on the real reading of the Maya hieroglyphic writing system. I know that many epigraphers have done a good job trying to provide us with certain readings, but I'm not happy with that as an indigenous person because they haven't finished with that project. We don't know Maya history. There are many written texts there. That was the creation of so many bad stories about the Maya because we cannot really read what is left from their writing. So, finally, we can ask, why is the 13 Baktun a challenge to the Western mind? Because most of the greatest achievements of the Mayas have not been understood totally, and there are still myths about them. Most of the time, these greatest achievements of the Mayas have been denied, justifying the racist treatment of natives as inferior people. The challenge to the Western mind rests in two major dilemmas to be dealt with at the beginning of the new 13 Baktun. The indigenous people must be understood, respected, and treated as equals to others and not as second-class citizens in their countries. That the more than 5 centuries of domination and racist discrimination against the Maya as well indigenous people elsewhere must stop forever. Second, that indigenous research must start with indigenous people leading the project so that they provide new ideas to be experimented and not to follow what it is already prescribed by Western researchers. This is my proposal for the development of an indigenous and non-indigenous multidisciplinary team for the true decipherment of the Maya hieroglyphic writing system. Some of the ideas and methods are presented in my new book, Mayalogue, for the purpose of developing other works that will open Maya cosmology and epistemology to the outside world in order to understand better the great and eternal Mayas of then and now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victor. That's a wonderful presentation and clear evidence for, I think, the philosophy of this museum to always try to feature people from inside the cultures. Not only culture-bearing people, as we did this morning with Don Federico Teni, but also culture-bearing people who are intellectuals, who are capable of studying beyond their own culture and understanding the world. I think this question of recovering from being orphans to being parents again of one's own culture is fascinating and exactly the way we have to go. We're open for some questions. If there's a little time, we welcome commentary or questions, so please use the mic at the back of the room.
We have a question from one of our Twitter followers.
Oh, wonderful.
And the question is, will the cycling of the 13 Baktun invigorate the Maya political struggles in Central America?
This is precisely what I was mentioning when I say it is not going to be a harmonious, peaceful transition from a Baktun to a Baktun. We are living in a very difficult world, and that's why I say the indigenous people must start that project of getting rid of those racist and discriminatory treatment that they have. But that must be a dialogue between indigenous people and their governments. Because, like, let's say in Guatemala, let's say when we say, we indigenous people, we the Mayas, we have our own worldviews, and the Ladino population, most of the time they say, why do you talk about Indios y Ladinos? Why do you talk about Mayas and Ladinos? We are all equals. But the reality, and as the ex-president, vice president of Guatemala, Dr. Eduardo Stein said, in Guatemala, there are some people that are more equals than others, right? So not everybody are equals, but this is the very easy way to get rid of the debate, to change. Don't talk about it. So yes, definitely, for the indigenous people, I think this is a moment of empowerment. And my role as an academic, as a professional, and as a Maya from the inside, I have finished this manuscript with 13 chapters. It's a 400-page manuscript about new proposals, about new theories, about what to do, how to change the, let's say, humanities or anthropology, social sciences. Because I think there are different ways of doing things that indigenous people know, but we don't listen to them. We always come and present to them, this is the way how things should be done. But this is a moment in which we need to listen to these indigenous people, and that's why I say we need to come together. Not only indigenous, it has to be indigenous and non-indigenous. The problem is that we indigenous people, or I think there are very few indigenous people who are well-trained to present new perspective, new works that can change the world. So we have been always listeners. We have been there listening to what people say, but now we need to speak to the world. And with the 13 Baktun, really the Maya are speaking to the world, to the whole world.
We have another question from our followers, this one from a physicist out in Arizona. He asks, what is the biggest wish of the Maya for the rest of the world in regards to our understanding of Mayan culture?
What is the wish?
Biggest wish.
Can you repeat it again? Because that's.
What is the biggest wish of the Maya for the rest of the world?
Okay. I think the biggest wish of the Maya is that the Mayas be understood as regular human beings, not to be treated as people of the past. That's my insistence on the issue of colonialism. When we think about indigenous people, we immediately think of the past. That anecdote that I told you about the lady in Montana, of course, she wanted to see a Maya with a feather or naked person. I don't know what. You are a Maya. So that is the way how we think that we have conditioned indigenous people in a timeless past. They cannot really be at the level of life that we are now living. This is what Johannes Fabian has called allochronism, right? That they are there in the past and we are here, civilization. We cannot never be at the same level. So the biggest wish is that this time the world that are paying attention, and this will go away. On December 22, 2012, when nothing will happen, once again, everybody will go back and think again what will be the next event where we can play and prophesize about. And they will forget the Mayas again, right? Here we are focusing about the ancient Mayas, not about the modern Mayans, because they are busy there. Most of them don't even know about the Maya calendar, right? So this is a world event in which we wish that indigenous people start from all over the world, and also the world can think that the Mayas have provided a great contribution to the world, and they should be recognized by that and be supported in all of their projects in which they should become, as Jose Barreiro just mentioned, not just orphan of knowledge, but they should go to achieve higher education, right? How can we help Guatemala as a nation to change its policy and politics, and also to provide indigenous people with that opportunity? But once again, I think we indigenous people have not been able to explain to the world who we are. That's why the work of scholars who want to tell the world what is to be Mayan and provide new ideas that can be discussed. Because I'm not saying that we, the Maya, have the sole truth, that we are totally truth. As civilization, as human beings, everybody make mistakes, right? So we want to be understood as real human beings and be at the level of everyone. Educational opportunity will be the greatest thing to achieve for all of the Mayans.
Another question?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Montejo. First, to thank you for traveling over to be here with us in Washington and to share this lecture with all of us. More than a question, a comment to the audience. Mayan culture is alive in Guatemala. It's part of Guatemala, and we're proud to have this legacy, living legacy with us. The Mayan society, there's a lot of challenges, yes, and there's a lot of efforts to bring the education and opportunities to bring this equality to be a real one. But there are great leaders in the Mayan community in every aspect, and there are an important sector in our economy, and they are present here in the States as well. They are very, very hard workers, and the productions of a lot of goods in Guatemala, Mayan entrepreneurs are present. So we have a great proud of what the Mayan culture and legacy is today. And that was the whole purpose of this program this weekend on the Museum of American Indian, just to share how alive the Mayan culture is and how proud we are of having this legacy with us. And we thank the museum for the opportunity to have this space and to be with all of you. Thank you.
So I have a question, and with great respect, I have a lot of admiration for your hopes for the future of Mayan indigenous people in Guatemala and all around Central America, but I confess I am not as optimistic as you. And I wonder what grounds you have for your optimism for a Mayan indigenous revival, if you like, if we look at the way in which power and cultural capital is distributed currently around Central America and in general around the less industrialized nations of the world. I personally see very little basis on which I can say that indigenous Mayans in rural communities will have a very different future.
Well, it's precise. I'm really that much optimistic either. I was talking about it won't be a very easy, smooth transition of the Baktun. This is a difficult time that we are living. We are living in a world that has changed so much, and we have forgotten already the teachings, the early teaching of the ancestors. Their violence. Look at with all my heart and respect, and with the families of those children who were killed in Connecticut. You see, even in this great country, where security is everywhere, is this happening? Imagine all over the world there are problems. So that's why I say, when people say, like Jose Arguelles, we are moving to an harmonious era, it's a wishful thinking, right? I think this is a moment to rethink ourselves as human beings. What are our relationships with Mother Earth, nature, humans, and the cosmos? Because for indigenous people, everything is interrelated. And so it is the theory that I am proposing here, an interactionist theory of indigenous cultures that we can change. So yes, you are right, there are many problems. There are the struggle for the land, the landless peasants there are problems. That's why I say, yeah, the world just enjoy things, celebration. 21st, you will see in Guatemala, all of the Maya ancient sites will be full of tourists. That finished, they will be gone, the people will be with their same problems, right? So I think this is a moment to rethink and create institution like the Smithsonian Institution. How can we tie strong relationship with indigenous communities, not just national governments, but indigenous communities, so they can represent or present themselves as they are. So I think that is a major problem. There are political, economic problems all over. So yes, I see. That's what I say, that it seems to me, and I'm not saying just myself, I consulted so many elders and Maya Akir, and they told me their dreams, right? I see this problem that coming. It's not going to happen on 21st. It is a long process of things. We don't know the future, right? I'm not giving you a date when things will happen. But the Popol Vuh say there were problems in the past, so the world had to change. We don't know how many Baktun, we don't know how many Katuns into the future that things will come, right? But the world is not the world that we live, let's see, before the coming of Columbus, for example. Yeah, it is being reduced. Resources are very limited, are being researched. There's competition all over the world to access those resources that are unfortunately in the hands of indigenous people, right? So they are the target for destruction, as we can see now. Why is resistance of indigenous people all over the world? Because we are focusing, or the first world are focusing their eyes on where the resources are. No wonder why many other nations from Europe, Asia are buying back the national debt of these small countries so they can enter and do things as they want. So there are problems. So it's just to answer.
If I may add something on behalf of the museum, I think there's two reasons that I find to be hopeful, and one of them is that nothing could be worse than the conquest and the early colony and the hacienda system and the peonage slavery that people underwent for several centuries. So there have been worse times for the people, and it's a miracle, really. The miracle is that so much survives all of that history. And the very hopeful thing that we're seeing in North America and other places is this idea of return. Many of our students, the native students in the tribal colleges and universities, are not being lost to the communities anymore. There's a conceptual framework where people come back full circle and go back to their people. I've seen many reservations in North America that were completely devastated 20, 30 years ago. They have begun to get the influx of the native students that have gone out into the world, and rather than get lost in the world, there's a real serious intensity of return. I mean, we even see it with Dr. Montejo, who could land in any university in North America and has, going back to his home base. This is, I think, one of the items that is really very hopeful for the future. Any other questions?
Hi,
Yes.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm just trying to get still an idea of how the calendar works, basically, and so I wonder if you could say maybe again how long a Baktun usually lasts, if it's like a regular cycle, how many years is in it, and are there Baktuns that are talked about in the calendar beyond this coming one?
Okay, I didn't focus on that because as among the Mayans, usually there are the experts, the Ak'ich, who deal with the Maya calendar. I don't want to enter much in the sacred knowledge of them, but the general knowledge that you can find everywhere in the internet, which that's why I didn't mention, right? But for the Mayan people, there are cycles. The day cycle, for example, the 20-year cycle, the Katun, the Baktun, which is the 400-year cycle, and so the ending of this period of time, 400 years, 13 times 400 years is 5,200 years, but since there are changes, adjustment in the calendar, we come up with the 5,125 years. So the problem, and it is a good question that you ask, it's always my question, right? Because some people say, okay, we are entering into the 14 Baktun, but the cycles are 1 to 13 Baktun. Is there a 14 Baktun? Is there a 15 Baktun? So then we become like a linear calendar that we go 20, 21, 31, as I said, or do we go back to that? That is the problem of us, of Maya priests, who deal with the calendar. How do you deal with the cycles of 13s within the continuous cycles that go on and on? So I believe that the first, this is controversial, what I'm trying to say right now, but when you finish a 13th cycle of a Baktun, you may enter into the first Baktun, right, of changing. And when you finish this, you will enter into the Kalaptun and many other cycles that exist. I don't want to enter into this because this is an issue that we wish we have the Maya astronomers and priests who gather in Kopang to tell us exactly how the modern calendar works. Because right now, the Maya priests, they just have retaken the Maya calendar recently. After the signing of the peace accord, almost everything came to life, and they start to gather in openly and start to rework the calendar again. But we have more than 500 years of hiatus in which it was really hard to practice the Maya calendar as it used to be with all of the cycles. So now many people are confused about it. So this is just a proposal, right? Because the counting of time, it seems that 20th, the decimal system. But to me, the 13 cycles are important, right? That's why in my talk I say very carefully, when we start the new 13 Baktuns into the future, right? It has to be 13 Baktuns again, because this is the time cycle that we have to continue to count within other big cycles. So the big hoop that goes into eternity, right, is there. So they will continue to time years ad infinitum, I guess.
Okay, and I have two comments here, not questions, but I think they're worthy to read. He says, I am loving the talk. It's wonderful to have Maya scholars give hard-hitting talk about the realities of modern day. I think that pretty much summed up. And lastly, I really appreciated Dr. Montejo's point and how we need to be seen as modern-day living cultures. And with that, we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just read this because I got I guess the call in a little bit blurred. I see this time, but just finished to mention here. To me, a good proposal of one of the works, and perhaps more that I want to write, is in the context of this new line of thought from the inside. And as you can see, I have coined this new term, Mayalogue, the Treaty of New Ideas, because when you go to academic, they always provide you the words of things. Now, we the Mayans want to start to provide. And within the text, you will find a lot of ideas going on. So it is a proposal, and I think this is important just to revive and make that shift, a positive shift, which we would like, of course, in our life. Thank you very much.